I can't tell you, he is one of the reasons that I am running for the federal Liberals and going to be successful in this next campaign. Without further ado, I want to introduce you to the next Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau.
Tonight by telling you about a friend of mine named Harjit Singh Sajan. He's about my age, with a brilliant wife and a couple of young kids. He lives just west of here, over the mountains in BC. But he was born in a small village in the Punjab in India. He came to Canada when he was 5 years old with his sister and his parents. His father had been a police officer, but he gave up his career to give a better chance, a better opportunity to his kids. Harj grew up and went to school in South Vancouver. He joined the reserves straight out of high school. His parents taught him that there is no greater honor than to serve one's country. Harj went to college while serving in the reserves. He was deployed to Bosnia and joined the Vancouver Police Department when he returned. As a detective in the gang crime unit, he stood out because of his leadership, not just on his team and his squad, but in his ability to reach out to troubled kids and help steer them away from dangerous life choices. But then, Canada went to war in Afghanistan, and Harj chose to step up once again. He took a leave of absence from the police and was deployed to Kandahar, where he did groundbreaking work in intelligence. He volunteered for 2 more deployments in Afghanistan and became the first turbaned Canadian to command an army regiment as Lieutenant Colonel. Now, when I first met Harj a few years ago, he told me a story that has stuck with me. He arrived one day with his troops in a remote village in Kandahar, just before the start of a large operation. An Afghan soldier looked at him, taking in the beard and the turban, and asked, slightly puzzled, "Are you with the Indian Army?" Harj smiled gently, tapped the maple leaf on his shoulder and said, "I am Canadian." The Afghan soldier looked surprised and said, "They let you join the military?" Then he asked what Harj's rank was. Harj replied, "I'm a major." And now, the soldier's incredulous. "They let you become an officer?" And the young soldier looked at Harj, taking it in. Looked at the maple leaf, looked at the bars and the insignias, looked at the faces of the Canadian soldiers assembled in the village square. Finally, he looked at Harj and he said, "You know, if such a country truly does exist, then maybe Canada is actually here to help." Now, after four tours, 1 to Bosnia, 3 to Afghanistan, Harj decided that it was time to step up once again and continue his lifelong service to Canada in a different way. He is now working very, very hard to earn the trust of the people of Vancouver South and become their Liberal Member of Parliament. He is a genuine Canadian hero. And when Stephen Harper attacks my deep personal respect for our Canadian forces, he doesn't just attack me. He insults not just Harj, not just the 18 Canadian Forces veterans who are stepping up as candidates for us across the country, but he insults every Canadian who believes that we ought to have the freedom to disagree with each other politically without being called a lesser Canadian because of it. Let us honor those who have fought and died for our democracy by keeping it healthy. We can debate each other's policies, but not each other's patriotism. Now, I wanted to share this story with you tonight because very few people in Canada value those freedoms and principles more than those of you right here in Alberta. And I'll tell you directly, Albertans and Calgarians deserve much better than this from their representative. Thank you so much for coming out in such large numbers. I want to first off thank Kent for that extraordinary introduction. Thank you very much, Kent, as always. Now, you all know Kent. His resume precedes him. Kent is a lawyer. He's a community leader. He's a tireless charity fundraiser. He's a trusted voice in this city and a great addition to our team. He's been a strong Liberal MLA for Calgary Centre for over 7 years, and we all know very soon that he'll be an even stronger MP for Calgary Centre in Ottawa. So thank you, Ken, for your kind words tonight. And thank you, Nirmala, for getting us started. Nirmala is an award-winning journalist here and abroad. She's been telling Calgary's stories for years, and now we'll have her voice for Calgarians in Ottawa as well. I'm thrilled to have you as part of our team. Thank you for being here tonight. And thank you, of course, to all of our candidates who are here tonight, Marlo Reynolds, Jeffrey Rock, and Matt Grant. Thank you, guys. Darshan Kang wanted to be here, but he's stuck in Edmonton on a vote, so I really want to emphasize that we are building a great team across the country, and in particular, one of the strongest Alberta teams ever. So thank you all for being here. Now maybe, like me, you're starting to hear the stories. The ones about how the economy is affecting hardworking Canadians. Stories like a fellow named Ron. Like a lot of others, Ron came out here a few years ago from Halifax to work hard in the energy sector and contribute to Alberta's growth. He's been a safety advisor now for the better part of a decade. He got married, had a young son. Recently, though, with oil prices falling, the contractor he was working for suddenly had a series of major projects canceled. Their bids for a few others fell through. Ron was let go from his job, and now he, like many others, is looking for work. But of course, the applicant pool is flooded, and Ron's trying to keep his head above water, up against more senior people who otherwise really wouldn't be applying for the same types of jobs that he was. So now what? Ron doesn't want to uproot his family and take them back east. And anyway, he's not so sure there's work for him back there either. Now, we've all started hearing more and more of these stories. They're happening to our family, they're happening to our friends, they're happening to our neighbors. So perhaps you're wondering what happened to all those promises that were made to us about a strong economic recovery. Now, my friends, you know as well as anyone in Canada that just a few months ago we were having a very different economic conversation about this country. Events can change things very quickly. But it's only in a handful of cases where those changes force us to ask ourselves whether old ways are still suited to new times. Because that's where we are now. So let's start by asking some straightforward questions that I think we deserve answers to. First question, why didn't Stephen Harper fulfill his promises on energy? Stephen Harper regularly told Albertans and Canadians to trust him, that his was the hand we ought to have to steady the tiller. But he bet everything on oil prices staying high. Now, anyone here could have told him how that bet would go. Mr. Harper might be the first Albertan I've ever met who thinks that oil booms last forever. Now, maybe Mr. Harper could have been forgiven had he made the best of the good times. Except he didn't. Mr. Harper told Albertans for years that he was your champion, that he was the man to grow your resource sector. But what did he accomplish? Nothing. Here's what he did. He refused to build Canada's relationship with our closest ally and trading partner, which made building pipelines nigh on impossible. When President Obama first visited Ottawa in 2009, he assumed Mr. Harper was serious about adopting a plan for the environment. But he soon found out what Canadians had already known for a while. Mr. Harper has no plan. Mr. Harper turned down invitations from the U.S. to take positive and necessary steps on climate change. Instead, he spent years trying to bully the president. Mr. Harper would not take no for an answer, he said. Well, guess what? The answer sure hasn't been yes. Keystone XL, a pipeline that would have created jobs and growth for this province and this country and strengthened our ties to the world's most important market, still hasn't been built. And it's because Mr. Harper refused to accept what the rest of the world already has, that the economy and the environment go hand in hand. Now, it didn't have to be that way. We could have had that pipeline built. All we needed was the right leadership. Instead, when our closest ally handed Mr. Harper the opportunity to lead, not just in Canada, but globally, he turned it down. And the rest of the world has gone ahead without us. Now oil prices are dropping, and expensive crude is a tougher sell. And Mr. Harper is lurching about, delaying the budget, desperately seeking a plan B. We can and we must do better for Alberta and for Canada. We need a fresh approach and a new way forward. And let me tell you, my friends, there is one. There is a better plan, there is a better team, and this year, if we work hard, we will give Canadians a better government. So another question. In light of all that's happening to our economy, what are Mr. Harper's priorities? The Bank of Canada confirmed last month what many of us have known for a while. Mr. Harper's economic vision has neglected the things that have always made Canada prosperous: diversity, balance, and partnerships between sectors and across regions. Make no mistake, for Canada to succeed, we need the West to be strong. But most of all, we need a strong middle class. Grâce à un leadership et une vision à la hauteur de la tâche, nous pouvons bâtir cette force. Un leadership qui travaille avec acharnement pour tous les Canadiens, pas seulement pour quelques-uns. With the right leadership and vision from Ottawa, we can build that strength. Leadership that works for all Canadians. That's not what Mr. Harper is doing. Instead, his top priority in this difficult time is to protect a gift of over $2 billion to the Canadians who need it least. I think that's wrong. To me, a strong economy is one that makes sure every Canadian has a real and fair chance at success. It means a thriving middle class, one that provides growing opportunities and growing incomes, and one that helps all those Canadians who are working hard every day to join the middle class. Because it all comes down to priorities, doesn't it? When things get tough, you get to see a leader's real priorities. And Mr. Harper's #1 priority right now is a big tax cut for the wealthiest Canadians. So take a moment to really think about that. Canadians worked hard and made sacrifices to pull the economy out of the recession 7 years ago. They created the jobs and growth that were just about to balance the federal budget. What does Mr. Harper do in response? He spent that surplus before it even arrived on a tax cut that benefits the wealthiest Canadians. A $2,000 gift. Let me tell you something. Families like his and mine don't need it. And Canada can't afford it. We couldn't afford it when oil was at $100 a barrel, and we sure can't afford it now. We need to be responsible. This means saying no to tax breaks for people who don't need them and investing instead in the people who do. And while Mr. Harper says his plan for the middle class is one that puts money in their pockets, he's actually campaigning on a plan that takes money from the middle class in order to give it to the wealthy. But then, these guys have never let a contradiction get in the way of a political opportunity. We can do better for Canadians. Our plan will give hardworking Canadians a real chance at better incomes, more financial security, and a more prosperous future. Our plan will invest in the middle class, and it will invest in Canada's infrastructure. Now is the time to invest, and there's work that needs to be done. Now is the smart time for government to invest in our economy and create new jobs now and into the future. The Conservatives like to use tax dollars to advertise about that, but we'll actually get around to doing it. We want Canadians to be able to retire securely. Right now, CPP and OAS just don't cut it. The CPP needs fixing so that it can provide adequate pension when the time comes. Conservatives would never do this. We will. We will offer a plan that gives tax relief to middle-class Canadians who really need it, like those who have trouble keeping up with the cost of living. The Conservatives aren't doing this. We will. And we will have a plan that ensures Alberta's resources get to market and get a fair price. That means we have to get serious about climate change. It means having a government that actually recognizes that climate change is real and needs to be addressed. It means we need to work with our allies. The Conservatives have never done this, but we will. It's 2015, an election year. And so I have a third question for you. Is this government really what Alberta actually voted for? No. Stephen Harper told Albertans he'd be open and accountable. And yet, his Conservatives oppose our Transparency Act that would make it easier for Canadians to know what their government is doing and how their money is being spent. Stephen Harper told Albertans his government would get rid of Senate appointments. And yet, he appointed 59 senators, including Mike Duffy, Pamela Wallen, and Patrick Brazo. And by the way, anyone who put those three in the Senate might want to be careful about making judgment a campaign issue. But in fact, Mr. Harper likes Senate appointments so much, he remains the only Prime Minister in Canada's history to appoint the same two people twice to the Senate. Mr. Harper told Albertans his government would live up to a high ethical standard. And yet, his appointed senators are mired in spending scandals, and his parliamentary secretary was found guilty of breaking election laws. And his best idea for national security oversight, well, he's currently sitting in a Panamanian jail cell. But most Albertans thought that their communities would finally get a strong voice in Ottawa. Instead, they got Mr. Harper's voice in their communities. That's not the kind of leadership Alberta or Canada needs. My friends, it's time for a change. When I first launched my leadership campaign, the very first place I visited was Calgary. Here's why. Unlike Mr. Harper, I refuse to take any Canadian for granted. Alberta matters. It matters to Canada, and it matters to me. Now, you may hear differently, I'm sure, because Mr. Harper's party can always make time to attack and divide. But what they cannot seem to do is bring people together and lead. And Albertans, like people all across Canada, are starting to figure them out. So I'll tell you this. They can stay focused on me all they want. I'm going to stay focused on Canadians. That's what sets us apart. Mr. Harper cares about some of the wealthiest Canadians becoming wealthier. He cares about attacking me. He cares about spending $1 billion of the public's money on partisan government advertising. Most of all, he cares about keeping his job. Ce qui intéresse Monsieur Harper, c'est de rendre encore plus riches les Canadiens qui sont déjà riches, et bien sûr à m'attaquer dans l'espoir de garder son emploi. We care about helping hardworking Canadians make ends meet. That's our priority. In times like these, the Prime Minister's job is to build people's confidence and stick up for those who need it most, not those who need it least. Mr. Harper has had 9 long years to get this fundamental thing right. He was elected almost 4,000 days ago. So we've had time to learn a lot about this government. And the one thing we have learned for sure is that Mr. Harper and his government will never change. But this year, if we work hard, Canadians will change this government. Now we all know that this is an election year. And in the coming months, you'll see a lot about political games, polling, and pundits. And I want you to brush all that aside. We need to spend every day as Liberals thinking about Canadians. That's why we're in this. That's why we're all gathered here tonight. Because we want to do more than just win an election. We want to build a greater country. Our priority is to help those who need it most. Middle-class Canadians, Canadians working hard every day to join the middle class. Remember that. Remember it when you're knocking on doors. Remember it when you're out pounding the pavement, when you're talking with your friends and your neighbors. Remember who we are working for. Because reading it in a platform is one thing, but Canadians from coast to coast to coast should see it in our eyes and hear it in our voices. And mostly, they need to see it in our work ethic. So get out there in your communities. Support your local candidates. Knock on that extra door. Hammer in that extra sign. Make one more phone call. Canada is a great country, my friends. And this year, let us earn the right to give it a better government. Merci, mes amis.